I'll take our seats. Good Shabbos and good morning. If everyone can take your seats, that'll be awesome. Shabbat Shalom. So
Please
good
be seated.
to be back. So just to frame today, I tried to share this in the teaser, but it'll be more meaningful to tell you in person how deeply I felt when I was in Israel sitting Shiva for my father, that I was sitting two Shivas for two losses. I had lost my father, and I just cannot tell you enough how something else has died in Israel. I cannot tell you enough how something else has died in Israel, and of course, we were staying at the Dam Panorama. My father lived on in Katamon on Shai Agnon Street, and virtually every day that we were walking to and from, there were just demonstrations all the time, just constant demonstrations. And when folks would come and pay their respects, and uh, they all knew my father from shul. It's a Dati Le'umi, very lovely shul called Kol Dodi in Jerusalem. And we would tell stories and vignettes, etc. And then at a certain point in every conversation, it would pivot to, how are you? They would ask me, how are you as an American, as a rabbi, processing what's going on in Israel? And I would always say, oh, it's just so exciting. Israel at 75. It's so wonderful. Israel at 75. What a miracle. And I would ask them, how are you processing 75 years? I mean, we've been reading this Danny Gordis book, Israel. It's like such a miracle. It's like such a long shot that Israel even exists. And to a person, the responses, and I know I shared this in the teaser, were either, like, they're not even thinking, it's not even on their radar screen, or more hauntingly, I hope we make it there. It's not clear to us that we will. It is not, and they weren't being facetious. So I hope we make it to Israel 75. And these are all people who've served in the military. They're Dati Le'umi, so they're traditional Jews, Shachris Min Chamarev, and they're very passionate Zionists. And they've all served in the army, and their kids all serve, their grandkids all serve in the army. They're passionate Zionists, and they were saying to me, can you reach out to your leaders to exert pressure on Israel because our democracy is in peril? So what I want to be talking about today, and we'll say the prayer for Torah, is not what we can do regarding Israel, because we can't control Israel. But the question I want to focus on is our own response. How do we respond to Israel? Not how do we force Israel, but how do we respond to Israel? And given all that's at stake and all the uncertainty and all the tumult and all the incessant tragic headlines. I mean, today, while President Herzog is giving his sermon, his speech, there's also a terrorist attack, and the head of security and police in Tel Aviv is sacked by Ben Gvir because he's not hard enough on Israelis who are protesting. All this horrible stuff, literally all happening at the same time. A speech, a sacking, and a terrorist attack. How do we process this, and what should our posture be vis-a-vis our beloved Eretz Yisrael? So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam,
haolam,
asher
אשר
kiddushanu
קידשנו
b'mitzvotav
במצוותיו
v'tzivanu
וציוונו
la'asok
לעסוק
b'divrei
בדברי
Torah.
תורה.
Va'arev
וערב
na
נא
Adonai
אדוני
Eloheinu
אלוהינו
et
את
divrei
דברי
Toratcha
תורתך
b'finu
בפינו
v'fi
ובפי
amcha
עמך
b'Yisrael
בישראל
v'nihya
אנחנו
anachnu v'tzatzaenu
וצאצאינו
v'tzatzai
וצאצאי
amcha
עמך
b'Yisrael
בישראל
כולנו
כולנו
יודעי
יודעי
שמך
שמך
ולומדי
ולומדי
תורתך
תורתך
לשמה.
לשמה.
ברוך
ברוך
אתה
אתה
Adonai
אדוני
המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל.
ברוך
אתה
אתה
אדוני
אדוני
אלוהינו
אלוהינו
מלך
מלך
העולם
העולם
אשר
אשר
בחר
בחר
בנו
בנו
מכל
מכל
העמים
העמים
ונתן לנו את תורתו.
תורתו.
ברוך
ברוך
אתה
אתה
Adonai
נותן
נותן
התורה.
התורה. So, dear colleagues, good morning, and missed you, and so good to see you. Um, uh, I put out 4 texts. The first 2 were pieces by Danny Gordis, and just the title alone, let alone the content, swimming in a sea of resentment and hate, it's not clear that we can get back to shore, is just very sobering, because Danny Gordis has spent, every day of his life since the 1990s being such a interpreter of Israel's existence for us, and always in a hopeful way. And here, with a title, it's not clear that Israel can make it back to shore, and he just talks about how every segment of Israeli society feels betrayed, his word, by the state. the Jews, the Arabs, Palestinians, everybody, Haredi, secular, everybody feels betrayed by the state, and the swimming in a sea of hatred. And then the second piece, but we're not going to talk about that, that's background. And the second piece, also background, is this notion that pilots who are veterans, who are core to the IDF, say they want to skip some training exercises as a protest because they don't support a government that's not going to be a democracy. They don't support a government that's going to say let's just eliminate an Arab village. That's not the way Jews roll. That's not the way they want to roll, and they want to protest. And they're called a pathetic bunch of deserters. These are IDF pilots called by this governing coalition, which includes people who were not able to serve because they're actually criminals, and the IDF wouldn't even allow them to serve. And now they're judging veterans who did serve, calling them a pathetic bunch of deserters. I don't want to talk about that. That's just background. Okay? Here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Thomas Friedman column. He says, it's time to choose, that Americans have to choose. And he quotes an American rabbi that I know and have the highest respect for. I've davened at her shul. My children have been members of her shul. We have families here who are at her shul this morning. Gary Oren is in California, and his daughter Meredith and her family, Nick, are all members there. Gary's there every Shabbos. I'm all the time hearing from people who go to Ikar, which is where Sharon Brass is the rabbi. And Thomas Friedman says that in light of what's happening in Israel, we have to choose sides. And he quotes Sharon Brass, who talks about giving a death by Israel sermon for rabbis, and that she gave this sermon called The Tears of Zion, and she begins it with a content warning, a triggering warning, saying, dear Jews of mine at Ikar who love and support Israel, you're not going to like what I have to say about Israel. But rabbis have to summon the moral courage and gumption to give that sermon, and that's what Thomas Friedman says that we need to do. And my question to you guys is, do you agree with that posture? Do you agree with Thomas Friedman's posture? Do you agree with Sharon Brass's posture? I'm going to start with you, Eliza. We have a countable number of Shabbatot until, please God, you're on leave. So my question to you is, do you want to get up and use one of your few remaining sermon slots to just give a death by Israel, Tears of Zion, content warning sermon? Do you think that is moral courage or not? And if so, is that what is asked of you?
So definitely no. And I don't actually think that's moral courage. If there was a move that we as Americans could make that would solve the threats to Israeli democracy, if there was a move that we as Americans could make that would solve threats to our democracy, that would be one thing. But I don't actually think that there's a there. What's the ask? And that's what feels so problematic to me about both Friedman's piece and about Sharon Brass and about other rabbis who are getting up and saying, Americans, we have a responsibility. We should, the tools at our disposal are limited, right? What do we have? We have economic sanctions. That never goes well. We have rising anti-Semitism. Anytime you, as a rabbi, stand up and speak out against Israel, you risk inflating the anti-Semitism that already exists, the anti-Zionism that already exists, and there's no end. None of us have the power to even impose economic sanctions, even if that were the right action, which I really think strongly is not the right move. None of us are voting there. None of us are serving there. None of us have the power to do anything, really.
So, Elias, and thank you. I'll come back to you in a second, Liz. But Elias and Dan, what's your basic posture? Do you think we have to choose sides? Is that a helpful lens, Elias, in your opinion? We have to choose sides, and we have to kind of give Israel hell and this moral courage. Is that what this moment is?
Well, I want to start by saying that people asked me over the years if I wanted to be a rabbi, and I said, I like singing a lot, and why would I be a rabbi in order to be, put in a situation where I have to give a sermon about this?
Yeah.
So I'm so happy with my decision. We are seeing in a beautiful setting for Israel today. I disagree with this idea that we have to take sides. All right, we tend to think that we can take our reality in America and the Jews in the diaspora and with those eyes try to see the reality of Israel. And we are so far from that. All right? So this idea of taking sides means that we are well aware of what's happening in Israel and that we really identified with the people there. And, to me, always Rabbi Gordis is fabulous. Fabulous. Every time I sing Hatikva, I have something inside me, my heart. It's like, wow. It's like no other song in Judaism gives me as much naches and emotion than when I sing Hatikva. Mm. And this idea that 60% of Israelis are not represented because they don't look to Zion from the east because they are Mizrahi Jews and they look from another plan, or because Arabs don't represent their national anthem. It's not something that I ever crossed, that ever crossed my mind. Have you ever thought about that?
Not until I read his piece.
Right.
Right.
So this idea that we really understand what's going on there, and yes, we feel, yes, definitely, we all agree about the democracy.
Right.
Okay? But let's think for a minute. We regular Jews in America, okay?
Yeah.
What do? We give money to AIPAC, all right? And now AIPAC usually, I don't want to get into
And J Street.
Yeah.
And J Street.
Right, but I don't want to get into politics, but AIPAC is usually associated with right wing, okay? And then, all right, that's the worldview. That's the worldview.
Okay.
That's the worldview.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I'm a Jew from another world. I grew up in a different country. I don't know if you know that. But anyways, but what I'm saying, no, but let me finish with this. What I'm saying is that if the money goes to support a right-wing government who is very anti-democrat, and then what? I'm going to stop giving money to them, and then, but I love Israel. Right. So how do I take sides?
Okay. Dan, let me just hear your posture on this, and then I want to go down a little deeper here.
Right. So as a good Jew, I have, I flip both ways because I'm seriously concerned about what's happening in terms of the democracy there, and I want to say that we should be supporting, those that are being excluded, and the movements and the protests against all of that. And I think in some way that's in my heart of hearts that's the right thing to do. But then on the other hand, as all of us here, I think know that we all love Israel, and we had a few weeks ago we had I forget the article, but it was about one of the things was that if we really don't know what's going on in Israel until we actually read the Hebrew press.
That
right?
was Danny. Yeah.
Right, that was Danny Gordis also. So, and Elias, I agree with you 100%. We don't live in the shoes of Israelis. We don't live their reality. So, and Elise, you said this too. We really can't know exactly how they're feeling or thinking. And again, especially those communities that are the communities that are being excluded.
Okay. So, a lot to say about all that you said. And
what's your view on this?
Yeah. So I think Thomas Friedman fundamentally misreads this moment, even though I love Thomas Friedman, and I think Sharon Brass fundamentally misreads this moment, even though I love and have the highest respect for Sharon Brass. I'll never be able to accomplish what she has done in her rabbinate. But here's why. It's not moral courage. It's not moral courage to say Israel should be a democracy. I'm against Israel becoming hungry. 99.9%, if not 100%, of the people that I would be preaching to on any Saturday morning at Temple Emmanuel would agree with that. That's actually motherhood and apple pie. There's not a lot to take it. How many of you support eviscerating Israel's judiciary so that there's no checks and balances and Bibi gets to become a dictator? How many supporters are there? There's 0 supporters for that. How many of you think Israel should not be a democracy? 0 supporters for that. How many of you think that we want Ben Gvir and Smotrich flattening Arab villages and killing Arabs and doing pogroms? 0 takers for that, right? So when she says moral courage, so if I get up, or if you use one of your sermon slots to get up before you leave and say, I'm pro-Israel democracy, that's motherhood and apple pie. If you say, I'm against eviscerating the democracy of Israel, that's motherhood and apple pie. You're not bumping up against anybody. Anything here. Now, I acknowledge that in Israel, it's much more complicated than that. And there's actually a great daily yesterday with Patrick Kingsley from Jerusalem about why is it that some Israelis support eviscerating the judiciary, and they have their own thing. But 0 American Jews at Temple Emmanuel that I am aware of are pro-evisceration. We don't have an evisceration party here. We have let's keep Israel a democracy party. So therefore, I think the notion that tears of Zion, I don't see the tears are that there's a brokenness that we can't fix. Now, so here is what I do think is the moment, and I think our voice is desperately needed for Israel. Oh, by the way, also the other reason why is it would have 0 impact. If I wrote a letter, dear Senator Warren and Senator Markey, I support Israeli democracy. I support a strong judiciary. Signed Wesley Gardenswartz, Temple Emmanuel. What impact? If I were to ask every member of our shul, man, woman, and child, dear Senator Warren, dear Senator Markey, we are your constituents and we support pro-Israel democracy. We want a strong judiciary. Can you please see what you can do? Signed Temple Emmanuel, 0 impact. And if we write that letter to Bibi, 0 impact. If we're to write that letter to Smotrich, counterproductive. If we write that letter to Ben-Gvir, counterproductive. There's literally nothing we can do to influence that. Nothing we can do to influence that. But here is where the rubber hits the road for us as clergy and for you as congregants, right? Which is Israel's such a freaking hot mess right now. It is such a freaking hot mess right now that the temptation is that our children and grandchildren and we ourselves will just divorce ourselves from Israel. Who needs it? Who needs it? Who needs Jews doing pogroms? Who needs it? Every time you read about another terrorist attack, every time you read about another Israeli raid on Jenin, every time you see smoke and fire and death and violence, and you see demonstrations, right? The temptation is to say, who frickin' needs it? I don't need it. I'm going to do Shabbos dinner. I'm going to do Tikkun Olam. I'm going to get tzedakah. I'm going to read a good book. I'm going to go to Minyan. Who needs Israel? And that's a problem. And I think that's where our voice should be held. That especially now, when it's tempting to say, who needs Israel? Yuck. I can't do anything about it. I don't like it. I can't do anything about it. That doesn't take moral courage. And that is a different move. But I want to bring in the sin of the golden calf story. But first, let me just get your reactions to that.
I think you're absolutely right. I also think that this is a really interesting moment because when we talk about Israeli democracy, there are 2 levels of Israeli democracy. There's Israeli democracy for Jews and there's Israeli democracy for everyone that lives in Israel. And the democracy for everyone that lives in Israel has been fundamentally broken for a long time. And I think that the challenge in this moment is that there's all this outrage and all this, we as liberal Jews, we're not going to have a voice in Israel. And we are feeling deeply pain and we are feeling deeply excluded. And the reality on the ground has been that there's been deep injustice that's been perpetuated over decades. And that, I think, is a problem we have generationally speaking, because a lot of younger people have been very tuned into that inequality, to that injustice, to the duplicate bus systems, to all the ways in which there is injustice inherent in the system. And this moment, in some ways, reminds me of the awakenings that we've had, the Me Too movements, the Black Lives Matter movements, which is not new reality; it's just new relationship to that reality.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I need to ask you this question because, as I said before, I grew up in a different country.
Yes.
But it's not uncommon to grow up in other parts of the world with totalitarianism. Okay, no democracy. I grew up in Argentina. In my early years, there was a military government. There was no elections. There was nothing. Okay. So it's a little controversial what I'm going to ask you, but I need your opinion because you lived, all of you, with democracy your entire lives. What do you think is more important for liberal Jews? And again, I apologize if I offend anybody. That Israel remains a democracy or that Israel remains a Jewish state?
Let me answer by asking you a question. Who do you love?
He's a good rabbi, right?
Who do you love more, Mikey or David?
Well, David is here in the room, so.
Yeah. So, right. So
No,
in the
because
same way,
let me,
but that's
Wes,
my answer.
let me clarify
Yeah.
something. In Danny Gordy's article says that 60% of the Israeli Jews now are Mizrahi Jews.
Right.
Iraq, Iran, they grew up with governments that were not democracies.
Right.
All right? So is it that strange for them to be part of another country that hasn't done democracy?
So I honestly do think that the best answer to your question is who do you love more, Mikey or David? Because obviously you can't answer that because obviously you love David more. No, right? Because they're both infinitely precious, and it has to be and. So Israel has to be Jewish and a democracy. Now, and a democracy, to your point, we all know this has been challenged for years with Palestinians and Israeli Arabs. We all know this. Um, but yes, but that's super complicated because I actually in my sisterhood class we're just reading chapter 17 of Danny Gordis's book on Israel, which is true. There's not a word that's false in there. There's not a letter that's false in there. And it's about how in the last year of Clinton's administration, Clinton was super committed to making peace with the Palestinians and Israelis. And Ehud Barak, right? So Rabin is assassinated. Israel elects Netanyahu for a spell, and Netanyahu's right wing, and screw Oslo. And then after Netanyahu is elected the first time, he's elected out of office, and Ehud Barak is elected in office. And Ehud Barak is one of the most decorated military veterans in the history of the state of Israel. Ehud Barak is like Mr. Military cred. And he says, now is the time to make peace. And Clinton says, now is the time to make peace. And Barak says, we'll give you East Jerusalem. And Barak says, we'll give you, I've read different numbers, but 92 to 94 to 95% of the West Bank. And not only does Arafat reject it out of hand, he doesn't even make a counteroffer because his bottom line is we get to have Palestinians' right of return to all the lands they left in 48, meaning that from Arafat, the PLO point of view, the issue was not 67, the issue was 48, meaning that the issue was our very existence. So we've tried, and that's why there's some complexity in terms of not democracy for Palestinian Arabs. We have tried, and but it has to be democratic. Here's the question, and it has to be Jewish. Here's the question that I want to ask, because it's haunting how the Torah reading always frames our life. Thomas Friedman says we have to choose sides. He writes, American Jews, you have to choose sides. And the weekly reading in Ki Tisa is Moses saying, Mi Lad Hashem Elai, who is on God's side? Come to me. Right? It's after the sin of the golden calf. Moses says you have to choose sides. And if you're for God's side, come with me. And if you're not, we're going to kill you. And there's a civil war. And 3,000 Israelites are killed by other Israelites, Levites. So, and that the week that Thomas Friedman says we have to choose sides. So here's my question. I'm wondering, I want to step back and look at Exodus 32, which is the golden calf story. So for those, I mean, you all know it, but just I'll frame it. So the Israelites have just received 10 plagues that freed them. They've just received splitting of the sea that freed them. They've just received the 10 commandments at Sinai. And God comes down, and their senses are just so alive that they can see thunder. They can hear lightning. They're just like this. And they get the 10 commandments, and the first command is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And the second command is, don't make any graven images. Okay? And Moses is literally bringing the tablets down, and they build the golden calf and say, this golden calf, you are the God that took us out of the land of Egypt. Like a direct violation after having experienced all of God's love. Okay? When you read the text explicitly, the Torah's narrator explicitly blames Aaron repeatedly. So it says, if you look on page 535, I'll just read this. Moses saw that the people were out of control since Aaron had let them get out of control. So they might be a menace to any who might oppose them. And at the very end, the last word is, then the Lord sent a plague upon the people for what they did with the calf that Aaron made. At ha'egel asher asa Aharon. Here's the question. What light does this story shed? It ends in a bloody civil war. You have to take sides. What light does this shed on our problem now with us and Israel and within Israel? Anybody?
Well, to me, this is, in a way, thank you for bringing this text, Wes, but if you look at Aaron's actions here, is exactly the opposite of what Sharon Brass is saying about, or the other author about taking sides. Because Aaron says, Aaron is part of the golden calf. And then when Moses comes down, he says, it wasn't me. They pushed me. They tried to do that, and I couldn't do it. So Aaron didn't take sides there.
Right.
But we all disagree with that. He should have said something different. And I think it's exactly the opposite of the article you are bringing.
I was thinking of when you talk about Aaron as, Ohev Shalom Verodev Shalom, there's a yes and no. there is a time that that you can't just say, okay, I'm gonna be the peacemaker and just let people do what they need to do. There needs to be a time where you have to be a parent and step in and say,
Well, Elisa, I need your help here because you've taught all the clergy team about feelings and about seeing feelings and listening to feelings, responding to feelings. I want to just double click on this verse and ask how else Aaron might have handled this. And if Aaron had come to see you and said, what are some ranges of things? So this is 32, okay? When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. That's verse 1. Verse 2, Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, bring them to me. And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then he took from them and cast it into a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Okay? How else might Aaron have handled that?
So I think it's a fascinating moment because, you say two Jews, three opinions. It's such an interesting thing that Aaron doesn't say in that moment. Oh, I really hear you're so terrified. This is really scary. We're all here. We don't have Moses. The one guy that we've been depending on, he's gone. What would you want to do? Instead, he directs traffic in a very weird way. He's the one that says, take off your earrings and let's build. And then he blames it on the people, but he effectively directs their energy. So I think that's a missed opportunity. It's also interesting to me because when I was reading this, ahead of this, I did not identify with Aaron. I actually identified with Moses. It feels very much like Thomas Friedman and Sharon Brass are aligning us with the Moses perspective, that we're here with our holy Torah and the tablets that we've gotten from on high. We know about democracy. And that when we come down off of our high mountain and see what we think of as ruining democracy, we actually have the potential to break our own sense of wisdom that we have in judging. Because I don't see Aaron,
do you find that Moses being so ticked off that he throws the tablet and is disgusted and F you and how could you and is that helpful leadership?
No, but that is choosing sides, right? He definitely chooses God's side.
Right.
So, but then, the cost is we lose the Torah that's actually written by God's hand, right?
Right.
We are only getting Torah that's mediated by human hand. And Moses loses credibility. His whole thing with God is God, don't be so angry. Please don't have your wrath on the people. They're just doing what the best they can. And then he's out there with the army.
Wes,
let's
what it's called? How many views of the Torah? 18?
70.
70. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to have some inflation over there, but anyways, it's fascinating how you can see the Torah in so many different ways. Think about these days in Israel. All right. Think about a regular Israeli who is agnostic, all right? He feels about the tzabah, he feels about going in the airplanes, doesn't care about religion at all, all right? And these are the Israelites.
Yeah.
And Moses, it's one of these fanatics, who is the right-wing fanatics who is bringing religion and want to kill democracy.
Okay.
18.
So
18.
here's
80 sides of the Torah? No, 70.
70. So let me give a lens that I think connects this Torah reading to today. again, not in terms of what we could do to influence Israel, which is actually zero. I mean, that's the end of the story. We cannot influence Israel. Sorry to tell you this. Okay,
Should we start with Shachar?
Israel's got to work this out. The question is, can you influence your own heart? And the question is, can you influence your children and grandchildren at the Seder table? When at your Seder table in a few weeks, you will hear from your kids and grandkids who say, I'm done with Israel. I'm over Israel. And there is a very high percentage chance, like 98% chance, that one of your children or grandchildren is going to say, I'm over Israel. I'm done with Israel. I'm over Israel. Israel, ugh, we got problems here. I got problems here. I'm going to do Shabbos dinner here, right? The question is, that's something you can control. You can't control Bibi. Maybe on a good day you can be in dialogue with your kids and grandkids who are over Israel. So here's what I want to, here's a lens I want to leave you guys with. And why I so fundamentally disagree with Thomas Friedman and Sharon Brass, though I have the highest regard for both of them. They're offering you a political lens. Choose sides is a political lens, right? I think what this moment requires, in the only space where we can play and have a difference, namely our kids and grandkids and our own heart, is a pastoral lens. Right? What Aaron doesn't do is have any conversation with these scared, terrified Israelites about their feelings in different ways. He actually responds to a pastoral moment. They're scared, they're confused, they're dazed, with a political move. Okay, I'll sign up for the Golden Calf platform. He responds with a political move in a pastoral moment. And I think the better move is a pastoral moment in a pastoral moment. And so when your kids come at your Seder table and say, I'm over Israel, I'm done with Israel, I don't want to go back to Israel, I'm done with Israel, that you say, I get it. I get it. I kind of share that with you. Where are you coming from? Let's talk about it. And then have a whole conversation where you, not to be a cliche, but you listen, you understand, you validate. I mean, it is said that one of the problems with our generations on Israel is Jewish values. That is to say, when an Israeli minister says, let's just wipe out an Arab town, and he's in power, that's pretty problematic, right? And if our kids say, yuck, I'm done with Israel, I get that. If now the word pogrom, which was always done to us, is done by us, that's very problematic. I get that. So I think our move is pastoral. And our move is directed to our kids and grandkids and to our own hearts. When we and when the ones we love are ready to say, I'm done with Israel, that we honor that, hear that, engage that, and work our way through that. And that is, I think, the lesson of the Golden Calf. And that's what Thomas Friedman, I am democracy, hear me roar. I think it misreads the moment.
I want to just defend Aaron a little bit because he's dealing with a mob. It's mob. It's 600,000 mob psychology. So he has to, in a certain way, he's kind of. How can he? It's really hard to step back and do that pastoral move when you have thousands of people who are just so angry and scary. So I think maybe in some way, the other thing I was thinking about, there's also such a personal lens on all of this, what's going on with identity of who is a Jew going on with Israel. For instance, Emma, for instance, in this world that exists now, she can't be part of the law of return because being adopted, they won't accept her as a Jew. Having conservative conversion, they won't accept her as a Jew. So that has so complex, issues within just even within my family who has, and I have Israeli. My brother, his whole family lives there, and yet, if I wanted to go live there,
Was that the case before this new government?
I think that she could have gone. Oh, was that the case before too? Also.
I thought so.
Oh, okay. Then I misread that. Then okay. Okay,
Yeah.
but even so, it's still not a good thing.
Right.
Wes, can I ask a
Yeah.
question? Going back to what you just said about having our children in our table and discussing about Israel, you are saying that, which I love what you're saying, that with open ears and open mind, you are going to listen to them what they tell you if they are
Yes.
done with Israel.
Yes.
But I would imagine you will try to convince them why Israel is so important.
Obviously, I mean, here's the starting point, which is um, Israel, and this was to me the pathos and poignancy of this moment talking to Israelis. Like I walk around every day with this life sense of, oh my God, what a miracle Israel is. And without Israel, we're screwed. Without Israel, we're dead. Literally. Just read any Jewish history book. Just read any Jewish history book. Without Israel, we're screwed. We're dead. Europe is, was, will always be a graveyard for Jews. Without Israel, we're screwed. We have no future. And that is, if you look at my core of my core of my core of my core, my heart of my heart of my heart of my heart, that's it. No Israel, Holocaust. That's where I live, right? And the fact that Israel exists at all is the most incredible miracle. Like the most incredible miracle. That's true, and that's my bedrock, right? And today's headlines, what a hot mess. I hate Ben Gavir. I hate Smotrich. I hate the fact that the country is falling apart. I hate the fact that every segment of Israeli society feels betrayed by the state, that there's no segment that doesn't feel. By the way, the irony is that the members of the coalition, their people feel betrayed by the state. The settlers feel betrayed by the state. The Haredis feel betrayed by the state. So, right? So you have to be able to hold both of those realities and acknowledge that. Not to mention Palestinian Israelis and Arab Israelis, which is its own set of complexity for all the reasons we've discussed. But the move here is not to let that mess obscure the miracle. Here's how I would put it, and this is my main point. This is my main point on Israel today. If you have a friend or loved one who's sick, who's not well, who's going through a tough time, what is your response? Right? And is your response to pile on and you have lung cancer? What, did you smoke? Maybe you shouldn't have smoked. Oh, you're having heart problems. Well, how much did you exercise? Like, did you eat a lot of red meat? Right? You don't do this. You're with people. You're with people where they are in their pain. You don't judge. I mean, any kind of person who would say to somebody who has cancer, did you smoke? Or somebody with a heart problem, did you eat too much steak? Or did you exercise? Or why don't you take off that 25 pounds you've been carrying around? Right? That would be a terrible person. That'd be a terrible person. And I feel like we do that now. Like, Israel is not well. It's
even worse to abandon your friend.
To abandon your friend, right? So I think your move is to sit with. So I'll just tell you very personally, and this is, we have like 60 people from the shul who are going to Israel on Spark, and what I think we have, and hundreds from Greater Boston, it began as an anniversary party. Yay, Israel at 75. I think only if you're in denial is it still a yay, Israel at 75 party. It's now, I don't want to call it a Shiva visit, and I don't want to call it a Cholim visit, but it is now a pastoral visit. It's not a simcha, it's a pastoral visit. This is the visit where you visit your friend who's in a tough season. You're committed to your friend, you're going to be with your friend, you're with your friend, you're sitting with your friend. You're not judging, and you're not piling on, and you're not saying, why didn't you lose that weight, and you're not saying, why did you eat so much steak, and you're not saying, why did you smoke. You're just holding their hand and saying, I'm with you. And that, to me, is what's called for. Because all of us go through tough times. We would be screwed without Israel. Israel's going through a really hard time. And I can't control Israel, but I want to make sure that I can control me. And I want to make sure that Shira and I can, to the very limited extent that we can, influence our children, so that and me as a rabbi, to the even more limited extent I can, influence our members to say that their response to anybody who's in need, going through a tough time, is, I am with you. It's that Hineni thing. And can we say Hineni, not judge, not pounce, not critique, can we say Hineni? what we need is a pastoral move. Do you have a song?
Yeah, I think that the old song "Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad" works well. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad.
Thank you, colleagues.